Good evening, everyone. I'm Juanita Pinar. I'm the Acting Dean of the Faculty of Law, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all tonight to the annual IP Public Lecture. It is hosted by the Anton Mostert Chair in IP Law, and our current incumbent is Professor Sadula Kajikar. We are very fortunate to also have in our midst the previous incumbent, and that is Owen Dean. Owen, where are you? You look so comfortable here. It's lovely to have you back in the building. We have Professor Nicola Smith. She's the acting COO of the university. And Professor Wikus van Niekerk was also on our list. I don't see him at the moment. He's the recently appointed new VC, Institutional Efficiency. I was hoping we met all of those standards, but now he's not here to do the monitoring. A word of welcome as well to Carol Cutt. She's a Director of Copyright, Trademarks and Short Courses at Stellenbosch University, as well as colleagues from other universities. I've got Lee and Tong here, former colleagues and former and current students, as well as our own Faculty of Law staff and colleagues from practice and industry. Welcome. Tonight's topic of discussion is a serious one. You make it until we fake it. Counterfeiting. A significant portion of the South African market operates illegally, unfortunately, and that is costing the country billions annually. Seemingly, products at both ends of the spectrum are in great demand. At the one end of the spectrum, we have luxury goods, without which people can't live. And at the other end of the spectrum, we even have medicines and illicit and unlawful medicines, without which people can live, and in the variety in between various products and items. And how exactly that is going to play out in the South African context and the specific role and function of law and governance will be some of the issues that will be highlighted here tonight. So this year the format is going to be a little bit differently. First, there will be two short presentations by Mohamed Kader and Wensel Britz, respectively from Spoor Fisher and from Seidels, and that will be followed by a panel discussion. So we also welcome all of our panelists. They are all experts in their respective fields. We have Joanne Clarke, Brigadier Kobus Lategan, Braam Schoeman, Sergio Rodriguez, and Joe van Walt, and you see their respective affiliations there on the slide. So hopefully when we part ways tonight, we will not only be better informed on the logistics behind counterfeiting, but also our very particular role in combating this challenge. I wish you a wonderful evening, and I'm handing over to Sadula.
Thanks, Jonita. I won't waste too much time with long introductions, and you'll see why when we have everyone assembled, where they'll give a bit of a background about who they are. So I'm going to call on Mohamed Kader from Spoor Fisher to give the first presentation. The presentations are not going to be long. The idea is not for you to have a long presentation to listen to. Mohamed has lectured for us for a number of years now. He comes to give a guest lecture on our LLM program on trademark law, dealing with counterfeiting. And what I'm about to say about Mohamed is true for probably all our participants tonight. I describe Mohamed, when he comes to give the lecture, as the G.I. Joe of IP law, right? They are at the sort of coal face of IP. They have to deal with some pretty nasty people out there, criminal gangs, syndicates. So it's not a pretty business at all. But part of tonight's presentation, or what should come to the fore, is why it's important to do what they do. So over to you, Mohamed.
Thank you, Seidels. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to go off script slightly, Seidels, even though we're sort of running out of time. 25 years ago, not a GI Joe at that stage, as a young man, I walked into the office of Spoor Fisher for an interview. And Owen Dean interviewed me. And I think, as time goes and you develop as a career professional, you wait for the opportunity to say thank you to those who groomed you as the years went by. This is the perfect setting. So Owen, thank you for all that you've done, not for me only, for the firm, for the industry, for the university. And so that's my opportunity to say thank you. And then on a counterfeiting note, Owen was the chair of the drafting subcommittee that drafted the Counterfeit Goods Act. So he is intrinsically involved and has been insofar as this field is concerned. So again, my speeches or presentation will be relatively short. I'm going to ask you to read these two questions. It's questions that everybody asks who are not sort of legally minded. And as I go through the presentation, you can sort of try and answer these questions yourself, and then we'll have a discussion later on. So I think as a starting point, counterfeiting has evolved into a global epidemic, touching almost every sector, and undoubtedly has undermined legitimate economies worldwide. What we must accept is that counterfeiting is not limited to intellectual property. It is serious economic crime, undermining legitimate trade, undermining consumer safety, and drains legitimate and government resources insofar as enforcement is concerned. So that is something that we must sort of bear in mind. In 2021 alone, counterfeit goods infiltrated global trade to the tune of $467 billion, representing 2.3% of all imported goods worldwide. A stark reminder of the reach and resilience of the global counterfeiting economy. Illicit online sales, strangely enough, now generate more profit than drugs and human trafficking. And that's according to a study of the International Coalition Against Illicit Economies. It just shows the seriousness of this crime that we're dealing with. Pirated goods surged to $4.5 trillion in 2023, consuming a quarter of global e-commerce. And that's according to estimates from the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development and the EU IP office. Where do all of these goods come from? China. It remains the epicenter of global counterfeit production, accounting for roughly 62% of all counterfeit goods seized worldwide, mainly transported directly from China or funneled through Hong Kong. And that gives you sort of a global overview that this is no longer just a problem of a person selling a counterfeit Springbok t-shirt around the corner or small businesses start to make money. This is an economic issue that we're dealing with and an economic crime. Just some stats insofar as containerized cargo is concerned. The one thing I must tell you is almost impossible to get stats. So we pulled some stats over the years, consolidated them just to give you an impact or an indication of how impactful this is. These are stats from Durban Harbour. Now, Durban Harbour is one of Africa's largest containerized ports. And it's a critical artery for regional and global commerce. 9,500 containers are processed through Durban Harbour every single day. And that just gives you an indication of how important Durban Harbour is as a gateway into Africa, into South Africa from an imported goods perspective. Over the past 4 years, and you can read the stats, the border police has been at the forefront of intercepting counterfeit goods coming into South Africa through that particular port. 153 containers were detained, and the value of those goods exceeded 2.42 billion rand over that short period of time. Remember, during COVID, China kind of shut down for a period of time, so there was limited goods. China opened, and all of a sudden there was an influx of goods into South Africa. The loss to the national fiscus exceeded R1 billion. And when one considers various factors, VAT increases and all of those things, if you start to benefit, government starts to benefit from the import duties and the taxes from these containers coming through, it changes the landscape slightly. From an in-market perspective, and Brigadier Lategan forms part of the panel today, his team has been instrumental insofar as in-market operations are concerned. When I look at, and from a general perspective, there's two strategies that one adopts when it comes to the enforcement of counterfeit goods. On the one hand, it's your border control. So you try and prevent goods coming in. Imagine 9,500 containers. How many containers can law enforcement actually inspect? I mean, if you try to inspect 9,500 containers, that's the end of trade. The harbor gets stuck, nothing gets through. It's profiling, it's investigations, and then you try and get to as many containers as you possibly can. At this point in time, I think the worldwide trend is probably 2% of all goods imported to any country is examined. We're probably, realistically speaking, 1% because of other challenges, lack of equipment and machinery to have a look at these things. The scanner unit in some of the ports work and in other parts doesn't. You cannot expect police officials or customs officials to open every container. To give you an example, we were in Durban Harbour when Sergio was down last year. We get to Durban Harbour, the border police said to us, perfect timing, international brands are here, let's go to Durban Harbour, we have a container. Open the container, the first thing in front of that container is rotten yams. Now, so for two reasons. One, you don't want police to go behind, the dogs can't smell what's behind it. So it's either counterfeit goods or drugs. So an official or officials must then unpack that container only to then find what's behind it. And those are the challenges that one faces. But what is evident from this slide is you have the joint approach of now in-market operations. And that's where Brigadier Lategan's team has been instrumental. 2024, 63 operations. Prior to the existence of the team, enforcement was very, very difficult. It's very difficult to enforce in certain parts of South Africa. Johannesburg CBD is one example for those of you who know. Bellville Station is another example. The simple nature and infrastructure of trade is such that if you walk in there, you'll find nothing. You need to go behind the stores into the channels and into storeroom facilities and the like, and that's where the team comes in through a whole lot of investigations. So 63 operations, over 1.2 million units of counterfeit goods were seized in 2024, and the estimated rand value was over 500 billion rand. January to September 2025, more operations, more resources have been invested into it, fewer goods. And the question is why? The rand value is much higher, but the counterfeiters are now moving into higher value goods. So it's no longer the cheap T-shirt and the cheap footwear. It's higher end products, jewelry, watches, pharmaceuticals, and a whole host of other products. So it gives you a sense of what's coming through the border and then what's in the market. What I can tell you is this is the tip of the iceberg, if you want to say so, because what's in the market is unbelievably high. So in the media this afternoon, you would have read Brigadier Lategan and his team did an operation at Bellville Station. Seized a whole lot of product, 8 million rand. You walk in there tomorrow, it's full again. You go into Joburg CBD, you read an entire building, and you can seize 20 million rand of product. Tomorrow morning you walk in, they're ready for business. And the reality is, from a law enforcement perspective, there's just not enough resources to raid today and tomorrow and the next day and the next day. It's simply not possible. But it just gives you an indication of the amount of money that's invested into this from a counterfeiting perspective. South Africa is a country of importation with limited local manufacturing. So when people generally ask me, what type of counterfeit goods would you find manufactured in South Africa? It's more a case of the cheaper screen printing type of products. We have capabilities. But as soon as you move into footwear and other higher items, it's way cheaper to manufacture those in China, and the quality is much higher. So the majority of our goods are imported into South Africa. Durban Harbour, the primary port of entry. And for those who may know, you can either clear goods in Durban Harbour or by train into city depots in Johannesburg, which is another port. And this is where the challenge comes in. When you become a criminal, you find ways to bypass the system. The majority of containers that are being detained at the moment are in transit to another southern African country. Those goods are never destined for that country. But by declaring them destined for Lesotho and Botswana and Zimbabwe, South African authorities can't deal with it until we say to them, guys, these goods are not destined. So typically what happens, I try to get details of who the consignor is and who the consignee is in the country of final destination, only to determine it's a graveyard, it's an empty plot, or it's simply an area that doesn't exist. And then I say to law enforcement, this is a false declaration. And that's how we detain those goods. So the stats that I mentioned earlier on is not goods that are destined for South Africa. And the challenge is, when you have that situation, it's very difficult to bring somebody before court because there is no one because of the nature in which they operate. I had to put Cape Town in because we have. Cape Town is, I would call it a secondary port. We've started to see more counterfeit goods coming through, but not that much. Importers would generally change the ports which they use when one or more ports become more effective. So if Durban becomes very effective, they'll bypass Durban and go to Port Elizabeth. Port Elizabeth becomes effective, they come to Cape Town. When all of the South African ports become very effective, into Mozambique through the land borders. Mozambique into Botswana through the land borders. And that's why you would have multiple strategies from an enforcement perspective. The airports, and I'll deal with it now, the land borders, the seaports, and the airports. Passengers and cargo. Believe it or not, I have cases of 2,000 kilos of counterfeit goods coming through Johannesburg International Airport. And that, so you order it today, a few days time it arrives and it's through. It's quick, it's cheaper, well it's a bit more expensive than freight, sea cargo, but it gets here quicker. Passengers are coming with 10 bags full of counterfeit products. In 2018, OR Tambo International Airport detained more goods than any other port in South Africa, including Durban Harbour, because of passengers coming through. And if you look at the slide, OR Tambo is the main port, but then you have international flights, Dubai into Joburg, Dubai to Cape Town, Dubai into Durban. Qatar is exactly the same. And these are the flights that are used as with passengers bringing product. This is just I'm going to go through these slides fairly quickly. Johannesburg CBD is the epicenter. And when I say to law enforcement, when goods come through the port and they are diverted, where they're diverted to? They're not diverted to Stellenbosch, Joburg CBD. Joburg CBD has the infrastructure to store these goods, whether it's in the tunnels, up in the buildings, or other structures. And thanks to the team and the investigators, we try almost every week now to do more and more operations, but we have not even found the main sort of structure which these counterfeiters are adopting. So Johannesburg CBD by far. So if you're in Johannesburg CBD, please do not buy any goods. Chances are they are going to be counterfeit. And I had to also mention Brigadier Lategan and his team, because but for that team, I don't think we would be as effective from an enforcement perspective as we are now. And these are just some photographs, just giving you an indication of how these people operate. These are sort of 5th, 6th floors up in a building. And it's not a building where you sort of go in, press the lift, and you go up 10 floors, you find these goods, you pack them, you come down the lift. No, you're going up the stairs, and halfway through you have barricades, because they don't want people to find where they are and what they're doing. And these are right up in the buildings. All of these buildings have been adapted. So it is impossible, without the jaws of life, it is impossible to gain access into these buildings. Again, it gives you an indication of the manner in which the counterfeiters are operating. And then the question is it a victimless crime? Clear risk to public health. And when I mentioned earlier in the presentation, it runs across all industries, and this is the indication. And I need to say nothing, just look at the photographs to give you an indication of what we're dealing with. And all of these slides are not there just for impact. It's live cases that were not specific live cases, but I have cases in respect of each of these industries where counterfeit goods have been identified. The stakeholders, from an enforcement perspective, the South African Police Service from an in-market perspective, Customs and the Border Police from a border control perspective, the DTI and CIPC from a legislative perspective. We all need to work as a team. And the one message through all, that any brand owner will tell you, for any successful strategy in any country, collaboration is key. So today's discussion is these issues, and you'll hear about other general issues. But what is key is to sit with law enforcement and discuss and explain how do you distinguish a counterfeit product from a genuine product. So that when they're out in the market, when they're opening containers and monitoring containers and cargo, they're sensitized to the brands. And this is not just clothing, footwear, and headgear. Sergio is here and he'll discuss the alcohol industry. FMCGs is an issue. Pharmaceuticals is a problem. Motor vehicle spare parts is a problem. Counterfeiters don't care. I think that's the reality. Certain consumers don't care, probably those consumers that buy counterfeit clothing. But I don't think any consumer would voluntarily buy a counterfeit bearing for a vehicle or a counterfeit wheel, for example. I'm talking about the rims. Because once you do a cross-section and you see how poorly assembled they are, we have a pothole problem in South Africa. I'm not sure about Cape Town, but in South Africa. I would hate for somebody to be driving around with a counterfeit wheel, hit a pothole, and you have no idea what's going to happen. And that's the health and safety risks that we talk about. And then I go back to the question that I asked up front, and I think it's evident from what I've discussed, what the economic and social economic issues and challenges are. And if somebody says to me it's a victimless crime, it's certainly not. The victim is often an unsuspecting victim. And that is why you have companies like Moët Hennessy who would invest in having somebody to go all across the world to explain to government, to explain to law enforcement why it is a problem and why we should stop the sale of counterfeit alcohol. Braam comes from S.C. Johnson. Exactly, it's an FMCG. So, guys, thank you very much. I think that's the quick end of my presentation.
Thanks, Mohamed. Up next is Wensel Britz from Seidels, and hopefully you'll understand why we've adopted this format for this evening, because this is one area in which there's collaboration between law firms who act for their respective trademark owners. And I want you to see that, because normally people see lawyers as sort of being antagonistic towards each other, but here you see sort of common challenges. If a syndicate is involved in one brand owner's goods, they'll probably be involved in another brand owner's goods. And how we've split it up is that Wensel will look further afield, look into Africa now, and the counterfeiting in sort of the rest of Africa. So Mohamed looked at our domestic situation, but Wensel will go a bit broader. So over to you, Wensel. Thanks.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Can everyone hear me? Okay. Hello, everyone? Okay. Is that better? Thank you so much for the introduction and welcome. And hello, everyone. I'm Wensel Britz. I am a partner in the litigation department at Seidels. I started my journey as an articled clerk, working my way up in the litigation department at Adams & Adams, and eventually shift partnership to Seidels. Mohamed dealt with a lot of the issues in South Africa, the economic issues and social issues that arise because of the sale of counterfeit goods. It's certainly not unique to South Africa. It transposes exactly the same to Africa, and in fact has increased impact in Africa as a whole because of the challenges faced by a lot of these African countries. South Africa has done a lot to invest in enforcement ability by doing customs seizure at harbour and local market rates by Brigadier Lategan. Africa, unfortunately, does not adopt or has not yet adopted the same level of enforcement strategies and implementation, be it at the legislative level or even at the domestic day-to-day operational level. Counterfeit goods is not an international problem. It is a local African problem as well. Between 2.3 and 3.3% of all goods traded are in fact counterfeit goods. Africa is more susceptible. As Mohamed also mentioned, it ranges from spare parts to medicines to clothing to luxury brands. So it's certainly not a case of only the designer brands being impacted. It covers all sectors and all businesses. The value, as you can see on the screen, it's a significant amount of value attached to the goods being sold on a global trade. It is certainly a very lucrative trade globally. But apart from that, there's the indirect effects caused by it, be it loss of life, be it divestment from countries, and the indirect consequences of these actions. Africa, unfortunately, because of the challenges it faces, has become a hub for counterfeit goods to be stored or even manufactured and to be exported down south to South Africa as well as up north all the way to Europe. China and Hong Kong still lead the field in terms of production of counterfeit goods, but Africa, because of a weak enforcement environment, is slowly catching ground. Okay, so why is counterfeiting a serious issue in Africa? The World Health Organization estimates that 42% of all fake medicine derive from the African market. The medicines range from painkillers to antibiotics to weight loss medication to antiretrovirals. Imagine a situation where someone goes to a local informal trader, buys Benados, thinking it's the real deal, it will have curative effects, whereas that product has not been tested. The ingredients come from a variety of sources and is outright dangerous. Yearly, a significant number of persons, including children, die from simple things such as contaminated cough syrup, for example. Electrical goods, spare parts, like Mohamed also mentioned, pose serious risk of illness, of injury, and accidents because the products are not tested. Inferior materials are used. They fail under normal circumstances of use, and consumers are quite often unaware of these vulnerabilities leading to serious injury. Economic loss and stifled innovation. In environments where there's a low tolerance or lack of enforcement in combating counterfeit goods, this dissuades foreign business from investing in those countries. The net effect is they don't put up factories, they don't upskill the local population in terms of production, which leads to a global loss or countrywide loss of sale in those countries or skill, and they don't get to a point where they start to innovate on their own legs and put products in the market for Africa. As Mohamed also mentioned, the funds that are derived from counterfeit goods are linked to organized crime. It funds illicit networks, which entail smuggling, human trafficking, and the funds are used for bribery and corruption purposes. So it's a vicious cycle where goods are being sold, funds are being gathered. Those funds heighten the ability of the individuals to bribe the officials, be it at customs level or even local enforcement level, to turn a blind eye and let the products go into the market. Over time, there's erosion of trust that occurs where consumers start to distrust a certain brand because of the products don't work or they cause serious injury or illness, and over time, the relevant brand loses market share in that country. Okay, so what are some of the key challenges faced? So many of them, again, overlap with the situation in Africa, but unfortunately is a bit worse in Africa. There's limited resources for customs and border control. Many of the countries have bigger socioeconomic issues that they need to deal with, and what they essentially see as a private issue, private industry issue, as opposed to a larger governmental issue, they turn a blind eye. They couldn't care less. Free trade zones. Africa is on the verge of entering to an Africa Free Trade Agreement where countries want to open their borders to allow cross travel of goods into Africa with less regulation and oversight. The counterfeiters exploit those weaknesses of less oversight and regulation to further the network and cross-border sell the products. What we've also seen is that counterfeiters have started to spread the risk, as so-called say. Instead of sending large consignments of 100,000 items per containers, they split it into packets of 2 to 10 items in a packet and 100 packets. So if any packets are stopped, the impact would be very little, and they would bank on brand owners not being willing to spend the money, resources and time to take action against 10 items, because the value of the items, or the cost of enforcement, outweighs the value of the items in many of these countries. In many of these countries, the cost to get the police officials to take action requires a lot of resources, time and money. Digital trade e-commerce platforms. They're great, they facilitate ease of purchasing, but together with it comes the problem where counterfeiters have direct access to the market and they don't need the local presence or office or even building in order to sell their goods. The goods are ordered directly from Hong Kong or China, delivered to consumers in Africa, and local enforcement officials struggle. There's no shop to raid, there's no physical presence, you can't conduct investigations, and in terms of their ability to take action against online or online infringements or counterfeiting, it's limited. Corruption and bribery is unfortunately a key issue in Africa, which causes customs officials and even police officials to turn a blind eye and let consignments slip through the cracks. Quite often we have a situation where you organize a raid, it takes time, money, effort to get the police involved, excuse me, to get the police involved, to get the registry officials involved, and when you get to the day you need to carry out the raid, the information was let slip and the entire operation falls flat. There's a lack of regional coordination in dealing with Africa. Unfortunately, enforcement is still done largely on a country-by-country basis due to territorial sovereignty issues, but counterfeiting is not limited to a specific country. It's an entire network that is adopted by these syndicates, and it's intricate, where they have components travel through different countries to be assembled in a specific country or manufactured in one country only to be transported out to several other countries. It requires a more regional enforcement mechanism. Okay, so we've discussed the problems and the negatives about Africa. So how do we fix it? Strengthened regulation and enforcement. Specialized IP courts to deal with matters of enforcement on an expedited basis will create judicial certainty in those countries and precedent going forward. Better equipped and funded customs officials. Training is key. Go out there, meet with the customs officials and convince government or incentivize government to better invest in their officials. More men on the ground, more regular inspections, not to be driven from the private industry itself to let them know when a consignment is coming in, by which ship it's coming in and where it's destined for, as opposed to doing inspections on a routine basis and reporting to the private sector. So it's seen as improving their own lot in terms of investment and creating a favorable investment environment. Countries, as well as brand owners, can leverage off technological advancements. A good example is NAFTAC in Nigeria that have implemented the scratch pad or scratch code option on medicines. You scratch the code, you SMS the one-time PIN, and a consumer can verify whether the product that they purchased is in fact a legitimate and lawful product and safe to consume. QRT codes, where you walk into a shop and you see products and you can scan it and you can immediately backtrace to the brand holder to see that the product that you buy is in fact a legitimate, genuine product. Consumer awareness and education is also key. If consumers in African countries are educated as to the detrimental effects of purchasing counterfeit goods, where the funds go, that it poses health and safety risks, that it is keeping them in a position where they're not upskilled and divestment occurs in a country, over time, they should be more willing to make an educated choice not to buy that counterfeit product. And lastly, regional cooperation. In our ideal world, one should have a system such as the AU, for example, where you've got a regional enforcement body with localized officers in the individual member countries, where they can better share knowledge and information between countries and have a central or unified enforcement mechanism and regulation. It will assist brand owners in taking action in those countries, and it should not be bureaucratic. It should be more administrative in nature and be quick to resolve and utilize. So in closing, as Mohamed also said, it's not a victimless crime. It's not just about damage of loss of funds to the brands. It has, the counterfeit goods have a direct impact on livelihoods of individuals in African countries, and in fact hamper their prosperity going forward. It's not impossible to address. There is a bright light at the end of it. Use of smarter tech technology, regional enforcement mechanisms, more well-informed consumers. It's going to take a concerted effort of industry and government and political will to create a positive framework for investment into Africa. Thank you all for your time.
Thanks, Wensel. You can have a seat, and maybe our panelists can join you now. Mohamed, you too. So we can open the discussion. Okay, I'll use this mic and speak up closely to it. You can use that. So let's go to the next slide so you can see our speakers' names. Unfortunately, Braam, I think we omitted to have your name on the slide, so apologies for that, sorry. But, you know, things are a bit frantic sometimes. My first question to the panel, and sort of a pair of warm-up questions, right? Because I anticipate that there are students here seeing you this evening, who'd like to know how you came to do the job that you do, because they think that, yeah, this is a cool job. I think I want to be involved in this line of work. And so to prevent you from being peppered by like 40 students while trying to have a glass of wine and something to eat, maybe, you know, by way of introduction, you can say who you are and tell us sort of how you ended up doing the kind of work that you do. And in answering that question, or in introducing yourself, maybe a related question about what makes you enthusiastic to do what you do and what motivates you to do what you do. So let's start with Sergio.
Oh, okay, thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sergio. I'm the global head of brand protection for Moët Hennessy. Well, my story is a little bit, let's say, tricky, because I'm an IP lawyer. I have registered upon the Mexican bar because I'm from Mexico, and then for personal reasons I decided to move to France, and I also took the bar in France, and you know, I started my career as a regular IP lawyer, and suddenly I decided to move forward to brand protection. I found the experience super motivational, because at the end of the day, depending on the industry that you are defending, in my case, I believe that I'm saving lives. Because when it comes to counterfeits in the wines and spirits sector, it is true that people is dying because of adulterated alcohol. So when you take into consideration that yearly almost 50,000 people die because of adulterated alcohol, I think that that's what keeps me motivating.
So when you say saving lives, I've got some slides that Sergio has up, and you can see some of the circumstances relating to it, the illicit products and the types of conditions these counterfeit products are made in, right? When he says saving lives, I mean, you will agree that those are not the most hygienic conditions in which the products are made.
Exactly. I think that they are using nasty stuff to manufacture these illicit goods. And the problem is that they are pretty much well organized, and they have found a way to infiltrate the legit market. So they are able to manufacture illicit products as the ones that replicate exactly the same brands that we represent, and they are also capable to insert them into the regular distribution channels at almost the same price. So of course a regular consumer won't be able to make the difference. So and at the end of the day, the consequences, I think that we know them. Either we can go blind, because this is not an urban legend. Whenever the methanol percentage of the product that you are drinking is too high, you can lose your sight, or worse, you can end up losing the life. So I think that's my prior motivation when it comes to keep on the brand protection when it comes to wines and spirits.
Thanks. Wensel, how did you get to do this work?
Thank you, Prof. Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I started my articles in Adams & Adams, in a law firm, and worked my way up into the litigation department, and eventually found a love for protecting brands and taking steps to enforce brands on behalf of brand owners. It's a thrilling feeling when you take action against businesses trying to take advantage, or persons trying to take advantage of a business, and it's basically what makes me get up in the morning. It's fun to walk a life or a path with the business from inception of growing the brand, registering the brand, all the way to protecting it and preventing the things what Sergio mentioned. It's got direct consequences, and you get a good feeling inside you when you help your clients and you help businesses to stop this, which is a problem which is really of epidemic proportions and has serious consequences.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Braam is from SC Johnson. As I said, unfortunately, his name is not up there. But what I want to say, and it should have come through the presentations already, is that people often think that counterfeiting is about, high-end luxury brands. But you have seen it's medicine. And Nigeria, you saw Nigeria reference there, and the systems they've tried to introduce to ensure the safety of medicines. A few years ago, there was supposedly a pediatric cough syrup on the market in Nigeria. Now, with pediatric medicines, they tend to be flavored and maybe red colored so that, it resembles some sort of strawberry or something like that. Well, it was red colored, but that color was as a consequence of it having brake fluid in it. Right? So counterfeiters have no conscience when it comes to producing their goods. They're just there to, in a sense, misrepresent what they're selling, and don't care what the impact could be on children or anybody else. Braam, over to you.
Thank you, Prof. Yes, I'm Braam Schoeman. My English is not very good. I studied law in Pretoria. I wish I could have studied it here, but my father didn't have enough money. I wasn't very successful at studying law. I actually hated IP law. My professor actually realized that as well, so I got a 50. And then while studying, I was called up to the army. At that stage, I just said no, there was no way I was going to the army, so I went to the police, got involved with litigation while still studying, and then I got involved with the Counterfeit Goods Act. They enacted it in 1997, got involved, saw an opportunity, and I was then fortunate enough to coordinate efforts between the public and private sectors. Thereafter, I got a call from the music industry. I was the anti-counterfeit manager for the music industry for a few years, and then I ended up being with S.C. Johnson, which is a global fast-moving consumer goods company, and doing their anti-counterfeiting efforts. What motivates me on a daily basis? Well, first of all, my salary. I have to be honest. I think most of all is the fact that we're making a difference when it comes to combating counterfeiting. I've been involved with all the different types of counterfeiting, whether it's prohibited marks, when we have a World Cup in South Africa, whether it is copyright piracy, whether it's trademark counterfeiting. It is just great to be part of the excitement, part of making a difference, not only in South Africa. My territory is the whole of sub-Saharan Africa. But dealing with different law enforcement agencies and different legislation. And having recently attended the Interpol conference again, I have to say to you, where innovation and really good initiatives comes from is South Africa, because other countries, European and American companies, are so technologically advanced in their systems as opposed to what we are. We need to make a plan, like the Afrikaans people always say. And that makes us different from any other country.
Thanks. Joe?
Hi, my name is Joe van der Walt. I'm the CEO of Focus Group. I did go to the military. I was actually a career officer. I was in part of military intelligence. After I left the military, I started my own company, and we've been working in Africa for the last 25 years. We've been very fortunate over this period to work in about 47 of the 54 countries in Africa, and we didn't really do any illicit counterfeit goods or so forth until one morning my daughter asked me, you think you're so smart, why are you not helping our rhinos? And I'll get to how I got involved with counterfeit stuff or trying to stop it. So we started the foundation, and we worked with Kruger National Park. We worked in Mozambique, we worked in Namibia and a few other countries. We had successful arrests of Chinese guys and local people and so forth and whatnot. But we very quickly realized that people that are involved in the illegal rhino trade is also trading in illicit goods. They're also trading in, human trafficking, etc., etc. And because of our footprint in Africa, we were fortunate that we could actually do cross-border work. And we have we've worked with Spoor Fisher, we worked with Adams & Adams, and with the SAPS. And our approach to this is very simple. The key to this is intelligence. We insert sources within the syndicates. We make use of technology, undercover recording advices, video material, etc., in order to map the syndicate. If we don't map the syndicate, we don't know when it's going to happen, how they're doing it, etc., etc. Unfortunately, intelligence is a long-term approach, but it's a necessary approach. If we do not have the intelligence, we will not stop it. I'm not saying that what the Brigadier is doing is absolutely essential, but I do believe that one needs to have a public-private partnership with companies like ours, and not just ours. There are other companies, South African companies out there, that are working in Africa. And we have the ability to provide information from Mozambique or Namibia or DRC or Kenya or wherever we have operations of what is happening and what is heading our way. And just a very short story. There's a guy from Krugersdorp. His name is Paul Calder Leroux. I doubt if many people heard about him. So this dude is locked up in New York. He made about 100 million US by selling online medicines illegally in the US. Through his money, he then set up drug factories in Somalia. And while he was setting up drug factories in Somalia, he was also turning into an arms dealer, buying weapons and ammunition and armaments out of North Korea. He evolved to such a stage that he actually had bodyguards, he had hit teams, he was putting out hits on DEA officials, he was putting out hits on South African police officers and so forth and whatnot. But at the end of the day, we got him through intelligence. We followed him into Somalia, we followed him into Asia, and eventually we got him. What motivates me? Ek weet nie, baie keer om die bliksems te vang.
Thanks. Our colleague is here, Delano van der Linde, of course, in criminal law, and I'm sure he's listening attentively to this and starting to make connections to his own subjects. So that's why we have this panel here, so that you can see how this thing sort of interplays with other areas of law. Joanne, as the only rose amongst the thorns, I don't know why you're so low down. We tried to get the seats higher. But I'm sure you'll make yourself heard, so over to you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Joanne Clarke. I'm not a lawyer. I'm actually a commercial person. So I started my career with great global FMCG businesses like Kimberly-Clark, Unilever. And then I had the privilege of being employed by a food business, a leading food business in South Africa, 13 years ago as a business director. And I thought my role was going to be about growing and developing brands, which it was. And part of that was about protecting brands. And it was the first time in my career I came across brand protection and counterfeit and trademark management. Thankfully, my friends at Adams taught me about it. It was quite an interesting session. In the session, they started using very long words, explaining it to me, and I said, please dumb it down because I have no idea what you're on about. And in a way, that's something I bring to the table, because sometimes when you know too much, you don't challenge the paradigm. And so there I was thinking counterfeit was about Louis Vuitton and Nike shoes. I soon very quickly learned that it's about foodstuffs and, as you've spoken about, medicines and the likes. And for our particular brands are staple brands in everybody's household, but particularly brands that are used and sold by our most vulnerable, economically vulnerable people in South Africa. And many of our customers, in fact, almost all a large proportion of our customers live on social grants, and they use our product to actually make money. They use our product to bake other products that they then sell on the streets or at schools or the likes. And so I think that leads into the next point with what motivates me, because my job every day is about protecting consumers. And I often think about brands. People who are not in brands perceive brands are all about shareholders. It's an asset. it's about keeping your asset strong, making lots of money from your asset. Well, actually, yes, it is, but I think it's more about stakeholders. And the most important stakeholder to any brand is their community and their consumers, and particularly in our business. It's about protecting the most vulnerable consumers that we have, because here's the problem, is our brand's a foodstuff, and our consumers buy it. And by the way, our brand is a premium to other solutions on the market, but they choose our brand because they trust our brand. They trust us to look after them. They trust us to protect them. And that creates a massive responsibility, by the way, because if they buy our brand and it's counterfeit, the brand does not work, so technically it doesn't work. But more importantly, it lacks all the food safety. We're FSSC ISO compliant. Some of the pictures that were shown earlier by Mohamed and others of the kind of places that these products are packed and sold are definitely not food safe and can lead to all sorts of problems. There was a phrase earlier used about a victimless crime. Absolutely not. I wake up every day and I'm angry by people who, around a braai, talk about the fact that they've just come back from the East and, hey, look at the watch I got. I got it for $100. That makes me furious because it's not a victimless crime. We've got communities who are dying. We've got communities who are losing their last couple of cents to buy our brands to feed their family, and it doesn't work. That's not victimless. Mohamed, you spoke a lot about the economics of it, and absolutely the economics of it, the loss to our fiscus. But, so the one side of it is our consumers and our communities that are trusting the brands. The other side of it, of course, is that we're a company and we have employees. And our employees are also wanting to feed their families. Our suppliers, the impact to our suppliers and their families too. So the impact of counterfeit is horrendous. And I'm really hoping that there's lots of lawyers and potential lawyers in the room. Please, I'm begging you to take this seriously. I'm begging you to be serious about it. I'm begging you to take it to the courtrooms. And when documents get lost, find them. When prosecutors say that they're not going to prosecute, impress upon them the impact of counterfeit. And so that's why I wake up every day. That, and I also like to get paid, Braam, because I've also got kids.
Brigadier Lategan, I think you've had a few mentions here this evening, so here's the person in living flesh, and please tell us about your challenge, or what brought you here first. We're going to speak about your challenges a bit later, but yeah.
Thank you, Prof. Yes, I actually matriculated in Oudtshoorn in 1983, and I was about to come here to this faculty of law, but then I diverted here at the gates, I think, to the police. Went to Johannesburg, Gauteng, and I've never returned back to the Cape. And I was...
No one's perfect.
But I do come here often for work. Yes, I was supposed to retire now in April at the age of 60. You're supposed to leave the police, civil service. But then the minister and the national commissioner spoke to me and says, you can't go now. We're in the process of building something that's working for South Africa. And so they extended my contract. So till 2028, and there's a possibility for another 2 years. Yes, I'm enjoying my job. It's nice to wake up in the morning and go to work in Pretoria. I know there's a dedicated team waiting for me there. How it came about is that we and the lawyers, myself and the lawyers, we actually worked since the 2015, 2016, we started to work together in Johannesburg. But with everything in life, with the counterfeiting, illicit goods net, everything evolves over time. And so it happens that they wanted to do raids in Johannesburg, but it became too dangerous. So they came to my office and I started to assist them. But so the operations got bigger, and it got also more dangerous. Very, very dangerous. So Mohamed showed some pictures here about some of the doors that these people are using to secure their stock.
So I've got some slides from
Yes,
Brigadier Lategan as well.
So maybe I can just go quickly through them. This is the people that we use. I will come now to the 5-pillar approach, but this is the people that we use: crime intelligence, public order police, the Hawks, commercial crime, tactical response, border police, national intervention unit. You can carry on, next one. And then a lot of other people. Now, the list that you see here, it was not that long, but over time we realized that you must need partners to make this a success. You can't work in silos. You need to get people to work with you as partners. But that is about the involvement of the team. So all of those people are part of, you can just go back to that one, sorry, the next one. Let me stand up. This is the 5-pillar approach that we use in South Africa. The first one is intelligence. Intelligence is my boss. Without intelligence, I can do nothing. That is through our brand protector lawyers, the public, the investigators, whoever they are. First of all, intelligence. Then the second one is high visibility, to see if you can suppress it. Then the combat approach, as we did this morning in Bellville. I will tell you a bit about it. It was a few hours ago. I think it's already on social media. We've got good intelligence from our law firms. We set up the team according to that approach. We hit the Somalians and we walked away this afternoon just before I came in with 8 million rand worth of stuff. We could have done much more, but we're only going back on Sunday. We know what we're going to do. They don't know it. They must still find out. So it's a combat approach, and I'll show you now photos about the combat approach, and then it's the reactive approach, case management, detectives, it goes to court. This is a kind of a setup where we work, cell phone shops, the batteries. That is important for us because when we went to Lyon in France now with the Interpol conference, there was a presentation done on cell phone batteries. It exploded while plugged into a house, and then a kid died. They showed us about cancer medicine. The vials right next to one another. One is counterfeited. People ordering online cancer medicine, and it's useless. People are dying and they think they're taking cancer medicine. There's a lot of other examples. Consumable goods, toothpaste that you can't believe how it's made, that's causing bacteria from toothbrushes to toothpaste. So if you carry on, this is operation in Bellville. That vehicle that you see there, that is usually the vehicles that they use, full of stuff. But luckily the Americans gave me jaws of life. It was busy today as well. It can push about 14 tons. And then we pressed, I think from the 30 vehicles, we wrote off about 6 that day. So this is the bales here on the right-hand side. It's usually the way it comes from China in bulk. And the stickers that you see there, or the badges, it's also been imported from China, and it's sewed onto jeans, a Levi jean, and things like that, and Gucci. But we started off in Johannesburg with clothing, leatherworks, and things like that. Then it went on to foodstuffs, and it went on to consumables. It became more serious and serious and serious. Currently, we're working also with SAPRA, the pharmaceutical industry, on medicines. It is unbelievable what people are buying, and they are busy dying of it. And we're also involved in the illicit tobacco industry. There was a big program the other night on carte blanche. Illicit cigarettes, 76% of cigarettes on the market currently is illicit. You should pay about 26 Rand 50. It was, it's now 30 Rand. 30 Rand must go to tax. We find them all over South Africa, selling them for 10 and 15 Rand a packet. So the country is losing billions and billions in taxes. What makes our team unique is that I work with people that is dedicated. I work with people that is a passion, who's got a passion to do this thing. So I've established a team in the Western Cape that is running quite well. I've got one in KZN and I've got one in Gauteng. The plan is to roll this out before I go and sit under the tree with the Labrador and have teams in all of the 9 provinces. Just lastly, Prof, South Africa is not that bad. We were recognized now by Interpol as an example to 196 member state countries. as a country that's doing something different on counterfeit illicit goods than all other countries in the world through the model that we've done. They came here, they made a video of it, they've busy put it into a product that is going to be immersive learning for students through Interpol. So if you're a customs member, you're a police officer, you can just enroll and then you do the learning program from what we've developed in South Africa, and other people can then also be taught through immersive learning and the goggles and that, how to do a crime scene and things like that. And so it's good that something good is also come from South Africa. But you need people that is dedicated, that's got the passion in the heart, and I think I've got it. And I've got people that's good in IT. I've got a guy, I'm a commercial diver for many years in the police, I'm still a diver. The other guy is good in this, the other one is good in that. We bring everyone together. But most importantly for this to work is partnerships. Partnerships, every country that we spoke to is partnership. You don't have a partnership, you don't have intelligence, then you're dead in the water. Yes, sometimes you feel, what else can we do, because it's feeling like you're chasing the dogs, you're chasing your tail the whole time. But at least a few good people, as we discussed, doing something instead of nobody doing nothing. That is my motto. And yes, for everything in life, you've got a no, but you can get a yes. And 99.9% when I asked, I get a yes. That's why we get the work done. Thank you very much.
Mohamed?
Through all of the speakers on the panel, the one word that comes to mind is passion. If you do not have the passion for what we do, you cannot do what we do. That's the message across. You can learn the law and you can be an expert on the law. But when you wake up tomorrow morning and you have Sergio on the line and he says to you, Mo, I have a problem, you need to find a solution then and there. Somebody called Jan Haram at Adams & Adams and he says, Jan, I have a problem. It's a new problem. You sit down and that's where your experience comes in. And I think you don't develop this over one weekend. You know, Braam spent many, many years, and I think the experience that he had through working in legal services in the police and then through the music industry gave him the experience that he currently has. And I think we all go through the same. But and what Joanne says also is a little bit of anger. So if a client calls you and says, listen, there is a South African company that's selling counterfeit diabetic test strips. Listen, your blood starts to boil. And all of a sudden, you can't have you have to have a rational mind as a lawyer, but you now need to go and find solutions to that problem. And it's not just legal solutions, it's investigation solutions. I need to know where they're operating from. So you have a little home in Centurion, and that's the administrative office. Where's the manufacturing facility? Where's the storage facility? How are they transporting those goods from Joburg to Cape Town to New York? And that's the type of passion that one has to have. Whenever I do Sedula's LLM lecture, I say to them, anti-counterfeiting lawyers are not typical lawyers. I think we do something that's a little bit different. We are closest to lawyers that you see in the movies. Not necessarily the court system, but I'll give you an example. In one of the discussions that we had yesterday was following the money. So I said it's an economic crime, and we all say an economic crime. Where's the money going to? So Brigadier did a raid today in Belleville. I can assure you that every single store is a cash-based store. Where's that cash going to? Goods, every importation document that I see is all EFTs into China and those goods come through. Where's the cash going to? And that's where you need to start following the money, whether it's the Reserve Bank, whether it's all of these organizations, and each industry will sit down together, develop their own strategy to enforce against that. And I think as a lawyer, what gets me up, and sometimes I think I get too passionate about this, but every client has a different problem. Moët Hennessy has a problem with counterfeit alcohol. That's a very different problem to a pharmaceutical company that has a problem with counterfeit cancer medication, counterfeit HIV medication, counterfeit malaria medication. Each of those has its own solutions. And then you have the counterfeit clothing and footwear. It's the clothing and footwear as a product may not be as serious as a pharmaceutical, but as a problem, it is exactly the same. And whether, I only had 10 minutes to do my presentation today, but in Durban a few years ago, people asked us, is this linked to bigger crimes? We found an operation that was dealing in counterfeit goods that had a direct link to terrorism. At that facility, we found all of the paraphernalia insofar as the terrorist groups are concerned, the ammunition, and the people who were involved were also associated with assassinations in KZN. So this is no longer an individual sort of little crime that happens. And that's what drives us. And I think as a student who potentially wants to look at this, you need to have something in you to say, every morning when I wake up, you need to have that drive. And I think all the lawyers, we have teams, and when we look for people, I look for passion. You can learn the law, but if you don't have that passion, I don't think you'll be able to sit with a brand and give them that sense of comfort that, okay, I have the right lawyer who's going to be backing me on this. And with the lawyers, you need the investigators, you need law enforcement. So it's not me on my own, it's me, my team, and everybody else. That entire list that Brigadier had on his slide are the role players. And what I mentioned in my presentation, collaboration. Without that public-private collaboration, we will never win this. So that's pretty much the...
Thanks, Mohamed. That links onto nicely onto my next question, because a lot of you represent specific brands, right? So, and there are problems that all brand owners face. But, and you can jump in. So, working for a particular brand, what's that peculiar problem that you have that, you know, is different from that faced by brands generally? And how did you come to discover this peculiarity and challenge in your products that you're trying to protect? You know, did you find out, you know, that the source was something unusual, that the demographic was unusual, that was affected, you know, that sets your problem apart from general brand enforcement? So Joanne, maybe you want to jump in.
So I'm actually going to say that there isn't uniqueness in the problem. So I'm going to start there. So I'm actually going to disagree with the question.
Okay.
It's not unique. And one of the things that's one of my little bugbears is each brand plays for itself. And I have a major problem with that. And I'm so glad to have in the room all the top law firms sitting together and the brands sitting together. Because there might be something unique about how our product's being counterfeited, where it's being counterfeited. But actually, generally what happens is if there's a raid, there are several brands that are found at the same time. And I do worry that sometimes we as brand owners don't collaborate with each other. And so law firms should be collaborating, brands should be collaborating. But in answer to your question, so to answer your question properly this time, so Mohamed spoke a lot about imports, and some of those stats were horrendous, about imports coming through the ports. Our particular brand, what comes through the port is actually the packaging. And it comes through the packaging, if you look at the documents, and I know I've got some ladies here who are massive experts at this, but it'll come through as being linen or some other definition. No one's going to be checking that container, it's got linen. But actually it's got packaging inside. And then what they do is they set up a packing, I'm going to call it garage, because I cannot say facility, because it's disgusting and it's unhygienic and it's terrible. And they pack it locally. And they sell it locally. And of course, it's them within the infrastructure. So it's not coming through the ports as a finished product. It comes through the ports as packaging only. And we recently had a scenario where some packaging was also perhaps being produced locally, which hopefully at some point, we will get to a point we'll go through the courts. But that's a unique problem in itself. And you know, Professor, one of the challenges is that these criminals are really clever. And just as we get clever, they get cleverer. And so they'll have the packing garage in one place, and they'll have 3 or 4 storage areas, one that has where some of the packaging is, some of the other packaging, some of the raw materials, and the finished goods. And unfortunately, often, I think because of corruption, the police are very slow to respond. So we'll find the one, and we know that they are going to go to all the other places, and they don't. And that's where we need to be working with the likes of yourself, Brigadier Lategan, and your kind of operation to respond quickly to these problems. Because otherwise what happens is we find the one storeroom, but there's another 10. What did you say earlier? You know, it gets hit today and tomorrow they're back up in business, and it's pretty much the same on our side.
Anybody wants to jump in? Feel free.
Yeah, I think, I want to agree with you there that different brands and so forth work in silos. We had a thing on toothpaste where I think it was like 12 containers that came in from China. And when and this landed in Beira in Mozambique. And when we went through it, we actually found that there were 2 brands in this specific containers that were there. And when we reached back to our client, which I obviously cannot say who it was, but I said, well, what do we do with the others? And he said, well, it's not our problem. Let them go and only deal with ours. And because we have problems with the Mozambique police service, so we just burn them. But the problem is that it is that effect from people. But we encounter another thing because our sources walk the streets, they deal with the people in the local communities and so forth. And one of the things we try and do always is to try and find out origin. Where is it coming from? What is the value chain and so forth? And when you speak to the local vendor and you say to him, but you're selling toothpaste that is counterfeit. He says, yes, I know. He says, but first of all, I need to make money. And second of all, people want to brush their teeth. So the normal product is too expensive. So now he's using this in order for survival. Is he a criminal?
Yes.
Yeah. You're right. You're right. If you look at the bare definition of it, you're 100% correct. But the question is, he was willing to do it because he needs to survive. And this is no, 100%. I mean, we can talk about all the negatives. We can talk all about this. But at the end of the day, you're dealing with, and I'm not defending them. I'm telling you what we find. And the problem with this is that they see this as just trying to survive. And that is a failure of the state. That is the failure of government not actually looking after their people properly, which is now forcing them to actually go this route. So, yeah, none of that adds value there.
There is a related question I'm going to ask, but I'm going to ask everyone. But Braam, do you want to come in about, things that surprised you about the brands you're trying to protect and...
I actually think, we bypassed the surprise phase.
When you first got into the job, that's maybe the way I should phrase it.
Yeah, well, it was so many years ago that we were still playing cassettes at that stage. So, no, I think what differs from then to now is we had full containers of counterfeits coming in. Now we have got mixed consignments. So where we used to have a full 40-foot container of kiwi shoe polish, which is one of our brands, we now have one that maybe have 5,000 or 10,000 tins in it. And it's mixed with other brands, counterfeits like Unilever, Shield, or any other of those fast-moving consumer brands. I think what did really shock me, especially when I was employed by the S.C. Johnson, is when I worked in Africa, I couldn't understand that our own customers were selling counterfeits. I thought there was kind of a integrity and contractual a contract between us and bona fides. And what we found was there was nothing like that. And I actually then took it from one country to another in Africa, and all the wholesalers I spoke to said at the end of it all, there's no loyalty. I'm in the business to make money. So whether I have genuine or counterfeits, which I sell, I look at my profit. And if you don't have genuine and you can't sell at a certain price to me, that makes it beneficial to me as well, then I'm going to sell counterfeits. Anyway, the counterfeits are much more available. Their distribution networks are much better than ours. And I think the last thing that I should mention, 3 months. It takes counterfeiters 3 months to copy our new promotion, to do new packaging, to manufacture, and to ship to Africa. 3 months. And I'm sure this is nothing unique, just like the loyalty issue, as to what happens in other brands as well. But that is things that I think the public don't know, how efficient counterfeiters are. And they're basically always a step ahead of us. Only thing we can do as a brand is keep our thumb on it. Because if you don't, you lose a whole market.
Thanks, Sergio. Do you want to, you represent Moët Hennessy, particular brand, particular challenges that you've encountered or surprises that you've unearthed?
Look, I had the chance throughout my career to be able to work in many different industries. When it comes to the challenges that we faced, I think that we have two sources of challenges. First, the internal ones, meaning that first of all, you need to convince your corporation that doing brand protection is important. Because we need to be clear, brand protection departments are a cost center. It's super expensive to do brand protection worldwide, so that's the first challenge. The second internal challenge is to get people passionate and motivated to do the job. To go to the field, do the operations, to be implicated into what we do, why we do. The second sort of challenge, I think, is the external ones. First, the variety of the problems that we are seeing as an industry when it comes to the wines and spirits. To give you a little bit of context, we are experiencing 3 types of illicit products currently in the markets. So the first one is the 100% counterfeits, meaning that they are manufacturing everything from the glass to the liquid till the labels and the closures. Everything is fake, and at the end of the day, the product is exactly the same as the one that we are manufacturing. The second type is the substitution of the labels. This is particularly for the wines. So they are, for instance, if they want to manufacture illicit champagnes, they're going to be buying cheap wine, sparkling wine. They're going to be taking off all the labels and all the trademarks originally imprinted on, and they will going to be putting Moët and Chandon or Dom Perignon fake labels, and they will going to be selling at the same price to the same type of clients. And the third, and is the most complicated one, is the refilling. Meaning that they will be collecting our own bottles that have been already consumed. They will clean them up, they will refill them with something else, a mixture that they will be manufacturing themselves, and at the end of the day, the product will be exactly the same as the one that we are manufacturing. So this is some sort of challenge, and then you have the problem with the relationships with the authorities, lack of motivation, lack of resources as well, because as they said, we can have intelligence to do operations every single day in many different countries at the same time. The problem is that we don't have the local resources to do so. So we are having that. Also the problem of not having enough deterrent penalties for these guys. Corruption issues, political or economic influences. This is something that we see very often because, to be honest with you, these people are very well organized. They are backed by very powerful people. They have a lot of money, so they can do what we do, but better. That's the reality. They are always having 2, 3, 4 steps ahead. So we need to do the same thing, but sometimes it could be challenging.
Right. Joanne and I think Braam also touched on it, and Joe. You know, I think it was last year where there were widely reported cases of counterfeit goods and spaza shops, and there were raids on spaza shops. And of course, we know from your presentations that there are legitimate concerns about public health and public safety. But of course, and I think Joe, you spoke about it, there's a social economic dimension to the street walker who's just trying to earn a living as well. And then you get sort of politicians who make problematic, xenophobic statements, you know, and you as the brand owner, you're trying to address a public interest issue and protecting your brand. How do you navigate that space, you know, between now there's a social media outburst, there's xenophobia, there are opportunists seeking to take over businesses, etc. But all you're interested in is to retain some credibility in your product and to limit the damage that this has caused. Do you want to speak about that, or, you know, is it something you just sort of have to almost roll with the punches, or do you try and sort of re-establish your confidence amongst your consumers?
So I guess this is a really interesting question to address to me, because you'll see my title actually says that I'm a director of an FMCG business. So I didn't actually display which brand I represent as I'm sitting here. And part of that is because the brand that we represent actually it's a massive brand in South Africa, and in fact it was recently recognized the 10th most recognized brand in the country. We're very privileged to work with it. The problem is that our consumers are those consumers that cannot risk buying a product that's going to fail. And so if they believe that there's counterfeit out there, they might choose to buy an alternate brand. And there's this balance between brand, because that's what we represent, as well as doing the right thing. I do want to say, though, that there's also some misconceptions about this whole thing about the poor trader. Okay, I'm going to put it out there. So our business, we have teams on the ground every single day, are going into store, and their role is to educate traders. And I need to make that point really, really loud and clear. So it's not the poor trader that didn't know any better. So the first thing we do, we go into the store, we say, we're not sure you're aware of this, because often some of these traders are unaware that they have counterfeit on the shelf. So we educate them, and we educate them on the impact of counterfeit to their communities, to their customers. And then we offer to take it out the store through a voluntary surrender process. We also educate them as to where they should be buying their product, because they'll tell you that they bought it from a guy in a white bakkie. Now, in places like Ethiopia, Kenya and the likes, that's a standard route to market. So it's not the same in South Africa. We go there once, we go there twice. We remind him, do you remember we came a few weeks ago and we did advise you? Oh yes, forgot. By the third time, he's no longer making a mistake of having counterfeit on his shelf. And at that point, we start bringing the authorities in. Because at that point, he's changed from being somebody who was unaware to somebody who, I'm sorry to say, is a criminal. And, you know, one of the points you made, Joe, was about the cost. By the way, he is charging the same price that the credible retailer next door is charging. So it's not always about the economics of price. You know, and so, yeah, that's my point on that one.
Mo?
I think it's the narrative, Sadula. Yes, you have the legitimate spaza trader, yes, and then you have the illegitimate spaza trader. And when I look at things, I'm with Joanne on this. you're either committing a crime or not. And the one narrative that nobody generally talks about is the runners of the counterfeiters, the criminal network that's connected. So you would have businessmen coming into South Africa and then illegally bringing a network of people. So you could have 300 illegal aliens in South Africa, all running these kind of spaza shops. And the question I ask myself is, you're running a small, how do you survive? You cannot be making enough money to pay rent, to buy food. So, and what happens? They stay in the store, they sleep in a little corner there because they report to the boss. So the boss holds the passports and the money is channeled through. That's all illegal. So when I look at it, I mean, yes, on the one hand, you have a legitimate spaza network, but when it comes to the counterfeits, don't forget that there's an illegal network that exists. And my view is the easiest way to get rid of it, if you're illegal in South Africa, you should not be in South Africa. As simple as that. So as part of the strategies with enforcement is you take Home Affairs with and you determine whether somebody is legal or not. If you're illegal, you should be out of here. If you are here legally and you engage in criminal activity, your visa should be revoked and you should leave. And that is unfortunately the reality. So on the one hand, yes, you could have somebody selling, when the Springboks are playing, you have somebody selling a few T-shirts and caps. That's a very different situation to this network that exists.
But we should be wrapping up, so I'm going to give each one sort of the last sort of opportunity to say what they think is really important for people to take away. And I think that it's about education this evening, right? So people don't realize about the scale of the problem. People think it's only luxury brands, but it's consumables, it's household items, and it's vast, right? But I'm going to give each one of you a chance. Brigadier Lategan, maybe you want to wrap up your contribution.
Thank you very much, Professor. During our operations, it's quite a lot of them, since 2017-16 till now, is that Johannesburg, Durban, Cape Town, but we also went to the other provinces, Limpopo, Northwest, and also the Free State. And besides the others, but what we found is, and that is a fact, is that 98% of these people are foreigners, and a lot of them, maybe 80%, 85%, when you go into their shop, they've got asylum seeker papers. All of them. Also, the people that they employ is from Zimbabwe, Malawi, and some other African countries. Not, in most cases, not our own people. Interesting, on the high-end brands, usually, what we found in Durban is that the Senegalese is very involved in that. They like the high brands, and they bring it in with suitcases through the European countries and that. On the cell phones, the batteries and that, and the earpieces, Apple earpieces, that people think, okay, that's nothing, it's cheap. It's not tested. It can damage your ears. The batteries will explode in your vehicle or in your phone or in the charger. So it's dangerous, and that is the Pakistanis and the Bangladeshis. And then the people that you find with the clothing in that is Somalian, Ethiopian, mainly. And they are in the country all over South Africa, in the smallest little town that you can think of, you will find them. And the big head of the snake is China. So yes, so there is a big problem. As I've said, with our partners, the lawyers, the investigators, the list of people in government that we work with, NRCS, Consumer Council, like for instance electronic stuff, take for instance the kettle. There was a program where they've manufactured kettles there in Johannesburg in the shop, but you know the quality is so poor. If that poor little Magogo picks up the can, the thing will fall out of her hands because the handle is completely rubbish. And imagine 20 liters of hot water falling on all the kids sitting there maybe in a shack. There's no benefit for the people of South Africa, especially in the townships, to make a living money out of this. They don't employ them. All the spaza shops, if not all of them, is run by these foreigners. In most of the townships I went to, and I went to a lot of them. So the economy is taking a massive blow. It's got an influence on poverty, joblessness, and then sometimes we find a shop on the raid through intelligence where they lock up foreigners from Malawi maybe, young people, in a manufacturing plant overnight, under lock. Imagine that thing caught fire, catches fire, the whole place will burn down. Those people are working there on circumstances that you can't even believe the way they are working. So it's a whole network, and then what he mentioned, it's a fact that money is going to terrorism. It is a fact. So people's lives are at risk with everything. It touches everything that you can think of, from your head to your toe in your car, gets counterfeited. It's a massive industry. But as long as a few of us can make a difference, we will do it. And we will give our knowledge that we've got to the new generation to carry this forward so that at one day we can make it safe. And then just lastly, if there was proper control at the borders, at Durban border, I've got a picture here of all the borders in South Africa. I think there's 50-something of them. Yes, there's all the borders of South Africa, inland as well as on the coast. It's unbelievable. I mean, a lot of them, Durban is the most important one, but then you also go to Mozambique. Lebombo border post is a massive route for us that we have to fight. Then you've got Limpopo with the cigarettes and things like that. So if customs and other government entities is doing their job properly and there's no corruption, there shouldn't be a big problem within the country. But unfortunately it's like that, and we have to fight it. But thank you very much for the opportunity to address you. It was a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much.
I was told to stand up because my feet weren't touching the ground, so I took the chair down. Thank you very much for the privilege of being invited here this evening. The point I want to make is that it's absolutely not a victimless crime. In fact, you know, we all watch movies about mass murder. This is mass murder. It really is. The masses that are impacted are significant, and the impact is huge. And the people that it impacts are not the people in the room. We have the privilege of shopping at Woolworths and Checkers. The people that are impacted are the people who are the most vulnerable in our society, who are earning only social grants. It's often a gogo. You spoke about the kettle. But it's that gogo who is then supporting an entire community of children. And it's her that gets impacted. So really, I implore everybody that you have to treat this as being a very serious part of crime. I understand lawyers sometimes want to be part of, sort of the top criminal cases, and that IP is that other part of the law that you spend, I'm told, 2 months on. This really is a serious issue, and it's a serious issue that's impacting our communities and our gogos and our children. And thank you, everyone.
I don't know if I must stand, but I'm just going to think I'm
No, you don't need to stand. It's
tall enough. I think for me, in closing, what is important is, and I'm very glad that the Brigadier said this, is the importance of intelligence. Without intelligence, we are dead in the water, simple as that. I think further to that, increasing cooperation with public-private partnerships, I think it's a very important step to take, especially because there is, in the private space, they are operating in borders outside of South Africa. I think third of all for me, which is an important point, which people normally refer to as corruption, I like to refer to it as insider threats. Insider threats plays a big role, and people are not giving enough attention to this. And very simply, what insider threats plays a role within the different brands itself, because you have people leaking out information and whatever they are doing. The same also of insider threats, unfortunately, goes further to the SAPS, border control and so forth and whatnot. Just a note on SAPS, not all of them are bad. We have been working with really good units that actually we got very good results with. And it sometimes pisses me off a little bit because they like to talk about negativity and not enough about positive stuff. So kudos that we're actually getting into Interpol. Yeah, and that's about it. Thanks.
Thanks, sir. Braam?
So, yeah, South Africans are good people. South African citizens are good people. They're not the ones selling the counterfeit goods. I can prove it just on my statistics that about 98.5% of the counterfeit goods we find, not just in South Africa, but also outside the borders, is sold by foreigners. So, just xenophobia, they call it. Is it really, if it's backed by facts? I'm going to leave it there. My takeaway is, consumers create a demand for counterfeits. Without consumers, there's no counterfeits. Whether you're buying counterfeits or a small counterfeit, like a rugby jersey, or a flag, you are buying counterfeits. And once we can get consumers, and I'm not talking about rural people just trying to make a living who don't know better, but us middle class. The rich people aren't going to buy counterfeits. They've got enough money to buy the genuine luxury goods. So it's the middle class. As soon as you buy, you create a demand, and you'll keep on creating it while you're buying. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. As Joanne mentioned, the person with the watch and bragging about the watch for 100 Rand in a braai. And to add on, it's about education. Is we need to change the culture and to get the message across about the detrimental effects, longer term investment, health and safety, and human trafficking, terrorism links. We need to get the message across. I also see a ray of hope. I think what we're doing at the moment in South Africa with Brigadier Lategan and his team is really a positive sign. I think it's a sign of greater cooperation between government and in private sector, law firms alike. And I think it creates a good platform, one which we should build on in future in order to better the enforcement environment and deal with these illicit goods. As we referred to the informal traders being the poor trader selling it, trying to earn a living. One needs to think about them also being exploited by these syndicates. They're the ones in the coalface being harassed and being searched and being forced to sell these goods under horrible conditions due to the syndicates. By taking action and dismantling the syndicates and stopping the sale of counterfeit goods, their lives will also change. Their conditions on which they'll live will change. So it's also about helping them, albeit indirectly, and by doing so, creating an environment for positive economic growth, creating more job opportunities and opportunities for further employment of those individuals who would ordinarily turn to a life of crime, for instance. Thank you for your time.
Sergio?
I think that we just need to remember that counterfeits, it's a global threat. So, and to be able to fight against them, we need to think global. And for me, the first and the starting point of a good global strategy is raising awareness and education. This is what we are doing here. So, first of all, thanks for the opportunity. I think that we need to keep pushing on collaboration. I agree with my fellow IP practitioners. We need to continue pushing the private and public sector collaboration. That's key. Otherwise, we are not going to be able to block these guys. At the end of the day, we are all being affected. We are all consumers of whatever industry you think about. At the end of the day, either myself or a friend of a friend might be consuming adulterated alcohol and might be ending at the hospital tomorrow or the day after. So keep spreading the word, and we need to be aware that counterfeits are already in our markets. Thank you.
I started, so I'm going to finish.
Okay.
Listen, I mean, I think I agree with everything that the panel has mentioned. We need to be a society of people who care about the law and who does not buy counterfeits. And the only way to do this is for us to spread this message to our kids, is for us to go to the schools and spread the message to the youngsters, and through whether it's through the universities or other channels, because the current consumers, in as much as we would want them to care, I think to a large extent they don't. And once you start educating the youngsters, you could well have a situation where it becomes a moral issue for them. And the new generation is a very different generation to everybody sitting in this room. And I think that's really one of our target audience. How we do it, Seidels, is something that I think we must think about, because I think through the institutions, and when I was at university many years ago, we had a street law program. And one of the purpose of the program is you go to the schools from where you came and educate the kids about whatever the current topics are. This could be something. And hopefully in time you would have a society that says, listen, we just don't want to buy counterfeits. Whether it's a t-shirt, whether it's a shoe, I don't think, Joanne, people consciously goes to buy counterfeit foodstuff. The consumer simply doesn't know. It's an unsuspecting consumer. But once you have a culture of people stop buying the basic counterfeits, and that disappears, all of these other counterfeits could possibly disappear as well. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, all that remains is for me to thank everyone. Changing the format of our lecture, of course, involves a risk, but I think you will appreciate or have appreciated why change the format of the annual IP lecture. This is not sort of one person saying it. It's a collective effort that is needed in addressing this issue. And by having people from all sectors, from law enforcement to brand owners to IP practitioners, you can see what a challenge it is to our society. So my boss is looking at me because we're running over time, but of course when you change the format, things take a little longer, so maybe I'll still have a job tomorrow. What makes IP law a great area of the law is not just the subject matter, but the great people you get to meet and learn from. And I think you will agree that our presenters and panelists have proved this to be the case this evening. They didn't hesitate to express their views frankly and to share their experience and their knowledge about the topic. So thanks to all of you for participating and readily putting your hand up. Annette and Gretchen will assist in giving you a small token of our appreciation for you participating in this event. It's small. I do not believe it contains any counterfeit goods. We try to source it ethically and above board, but it's a small token. As you can see, we have had a sponsorship from Juta as well. Edmund Beerwinkel is here from Juta. Sergio, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wensel. Braam, Joe. Joanne. Brigadier Lategan. I didn't, Mohamed, I didn't realize how much I enjoy saying brigadier. So I reckon I'd want our titles changed. I don't want to be a professor, I want to be a brigadier. Because it sounds so nice. So, as usual, and this goes to the point of education, our lecture will be made available. There's a recording of this video. So we normally get it uploaded because I'm technologically challenged. So that's where Gretchen comes in to upload it up on our YouTube channel. So it will be available in the next 2 weeks. We don't really edit it, but we just make sure that it's playing correctly. So give us some time. We are entering the exam phase next week. Tomorrow is officially the end of the academic year, so we're probably a bit distracted with wrapping up marks and getting ready for the exams. But all that remains from my side is to thank those whose efforts make this public lecture possible. In no particular order, we must thank our colleagues in the law faculty who are feverishly working behind the scenes. You saw at the beginning of this lecture, Gerda came to help to put on the air conditioning, and she and Kathy are probably waiting for us in the quad. I'd like to thank Jonita for again slotting us into the faculty's annual calendar. Of course, Annette and Gretchen from the IP chair for making all the arrangements, for doing the social media. They really go beyond what can be expected of them, and they do so in a very pleasant and friendly manner. And luckily, of course, they are the public faces of the IP chair, and you are here to prove that, right? If it was up to me, I mean, I'd be speaking to Tumbleweed. And they've built up considerable experience. I think they can branch out into bar mitzvahs and weddings and birthdays and funerals. They are really excellent at putting together an event. Thanks to our photography and video teams. As I mentioned, Juta contributed to the goodie bags. We are, of course, grateful to the two firms that are helping to sponsor this evening, and to Heineken, who have generously supported the event as well. If we consume all the alcohol this evening, we have a serious drinking problem in this faculty. And to our caterers, L&T. And then, of course, thank you for attending, right? I was surprised by some of the attendees tonight, including family. But it was really nice seeing some of you that I haven't seen for a while. The function has become sort of a get-together for the IP practitioners, annual get-together. And you have really turned out in large numbers this evening. So please join us in the quad for some food and drink. Thanks.